welcome to the B2B Growth Blueprint Podcast, where we talk with entrepreneurs, founders, and leaders at B2B services, tech, and SaaS companies to learn the systems and processes they've used to create success for their business. We'll also learn from marketing and sales experts to provide insights to help you grow your business. I'm your host, Mark Osborne, and the podcast is brought to you by Modern Revenue Strategies and their 10x ROI B2B Growth Guarantee. Schedule a free diagnostic call to learn the fastest path to double your B2B revenues in just 90 days. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the B2B Growth Blueprint Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Osborne, and today I'm very excited to welcome my guest, Michael Buzinski. Now, I'm going to read Buzz's bio to make sure I get this right because he's done a lot. He's a decorated U.S. Air Force veteran, a serial entrepreneur, international speaker, and best-selling author. In fact, he was dubbed a visionary marketer by the American Marketing Association. Buzz, as most people call him, is on a mission to eradicate entrepreneurial poverty by simplifying the marketing process for B2B service providers, consultants, and fractional services firms using proven frameworks that deliver profitable results. And this actually isn't in his official bio, but I couldn't help but call this out. He was actually a professional jazz trombonist at the early age of 13 and was even a minority owner in a professional arena football team in Alaska. So Buzz, I'm so excited for our conversation. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Hey, you're bringing up the old stuff. That's stuff. Some of that stuff happened back in the 1900s.
So before we, kind of dive in on some of the specific topics that we want to talk about, tell us a little bit of your journey. How'd you go from being that professional jazz trombonist to the work that you do today?
That is a long story. I don't think we have a long enough thing.
Maybe I will
get you there quickly. So yes, my junior high jazz band went pro. We recorded an album. We went on tour down the West Coast. We played at Disneyland. We had the whole 9 yards. Everybody went to high school and it fell apart. So so there's that. And then I was in sales and marketing. After my first job in fast food, I realized that I was not a food service guy. And so the only thing you can get into is sales and marketing. Back then, I was before the internet. I'm going to date myself. But I ran up a couple of corporate ladders pretty quickly, only to realize that, this is back in the 90s, you had to have a degree to get a management position. So I kept hitting that glass ceiling. So as a kid of the Air Force and a grandchild of a Air Corps veteran from World War II, obviously the military was something that was always in the back of my mind. I was probably the least likely to join the service and the only of my generation that did. So I'm third generation Air Corps now. Got me out of California, let me see some of the world, really opened my eyes a little bit even more. When I got out, I was in Anchorage, Alaska, and I started a recording studio because I was a working musician part-time working musician from the time I was 13 to the time I was 28. So, at night playing bands, playing stages, stuff like that. If I was in another country, I'd somehow end up, I was in Panama one time, and one of my friends talked the lead singer to let me come up there and play a solo in front of a bunch of 300 Panamanians. That was pretty fun. So those types of things happened throughout there. So I had a really bad experience with recording studios through the years, and so I was going to open up a recording. I did. I opened up a recording studio, and I was making it a learning studio. I'm one of these people who didn't understand what it meant to be ready for the studio, to be in the studio. Right. And so sometimes I would send them home with a metronome, drummers with a metronome. So you're like, why do I need a metronome? Well, if you make a mistake, I'm not going to be able to do anything with it, right? The crazy thing is about a year in, I realized that surviving off of starving musicians was a horrible business plan.
That's right.
So I pivoted quickly into the second poorest demographic that I could do media production for, which is small to medium-sized mom and pop shops.
Sure.
For some reason, glutton for punishment. So, but that ended up growing into a multi-million-dollar creative agency. Along the way, I did become part owner of a minor league arena football team called the Alaska Wild. That was rated the best marketed football team in the entire league. There were over 24 teams in the league nationwide. So that was pretty fun until the founder got greedy, grabbed all of his money, and left us all high and dry. So that was always fun. So, and along the way, I've owned a cafe for exactly 365 days from the day I
Okay.
signed for it to the day I signed off from it. That was, like I said, not a food services guy. But in 2018, I had created a multi seven figure creative agency at a 13,000 square foot facility, multiple dozen of employees. We serviced over 300 companies a year, and I was absolutely miserable. I had
Mm.
no financial independence. I had no entrepreneurial freedom. The only thing I could say is that I was making an impact because we were filling this void in the SMB arena where these big agencies didn't want to go because, well, I know why. They're just not a very profitable space if you back then, especially because there wasn't the technology to help people without that manpower, right? And without people, just 20 years ago, we were talking like this is just like I would say 10 years ago, where technology is today compared to there. I mean, we can just leverage time so much better. And so now I think we're actually getting to fill that gap a lot easier. But at the end of 18, I decided I was done. I closed the doors on a multi-million dollar creative agency and said, I'm going to do it different. Sent everybody home. Started from scratch with Buzzword Marketing as a 100% virtual company at the beginning of 2019. So very serendipitous timing. So
Yeah.
and then ever since we've been focused on the B2B content marketing and marketing strategies for a lot of things you do, just the
Sure.
professional
Sure.
services and the SWAS folks is where we focus as well. And that,
Yeah.
and that comes from my it's like a patriotic I feel like it sounds silly, but I have a patriotic duty or a civic duty to continue to make an impact after my service. And throughout my career, I've always heard from multiple presidents that, the middle class is the backbone of our economy, and I'm like, well, how can I help after the 2008 recession? I was like, wow, there's this huge gap going. And I'm like, how can I be, can I attribute to narrowing that gap, building that back up? And so in looking at, where does business in America really affect the middle class? And it is the SMB. And with B2B, when I help a B2B business grow, they're hiring more employees, but they're helping other businesses grow, which means that
Right.
those people are hiring. So
That's right.
now I'm leveraging my talents to help businesses create more jobs for both themselves and then their clients. So um, that fulfills my little civic duty piece of my heart, and that's where our
Yeah.
passion's at.
Dude, I love that sort of mission-driven approach. And we're, as you said, we work with similar types of companies, and we kind of have that mission too, but we see it through the lens of, helping businesses kind of, bring their goodness into the world, like
Right.
because they enable other businesses to accomplish more, to do more, and we sort of think about it as kind of giving them the freedom to focus on delighting their customers instead of
Hmm.
worrying about all the marketing and sales stuff, because that's
Right,
not
right,
where their expertise is. Their
right.
expertise is on creating this solution or service or delivering something that can really delight their customers. We want to give them that freedom to do that. But I love that you've got that mission there, and so you've got a ton of experience, obviously working with lots of different companies, working in your own companies, and you have a really interesting philosophy about this idea of transitioning from growing your business to scaling your business.
Hmm.
And I know a lot of our audiences probably experience some of these cycles that
Hmm.
businesses go through. But for those that haven't, I know you've got a point of view there. Talk to us a little bit about, what do you mean by that growing versus scaling?
So this is a pain that I experienced in my history of being a business owner for the last 20 years, is that, when we get into business, we're using brute strength, right? We're just brute force getting through,
Right.
getting
White
clients,
knuckling
beating
it.
down doors, white knuckling it, the whole nine yards. How are we going to make payroll? How are we going to pay the rent? How are we going to feed the kids? Those types of days. We all remember those 20-hour days, right? And the crazy thing is that most times, not crazy things, it's just very common that most of our efforts are coming through the networking because that's what we know how to do. It's
Yeah.
something that we can, that only takes time. And for entrepreneurs, time is this commodity that we're willing to spend freely. It's the only resource we can't replace,
Yeah.
right? And so we're in that space of more time than money until we end up with about the same. And we start looking at, well, now I'm out of time because all of those things take time, right? Networking, word of mouth is still takes the time. Referral marketing, it takes time. You have to keep those relationships moving. You got to have touch points and all these other things to really keep it moving. Leveraging those relationships takes time, right?
Yeah.
And there's no real way to automate that, not truly automate that, right? And so you get to this point where now you start getting this financial independence, and now you're wanting to buy back your time because you don't have enough hours in the day anymore, right? And if you're a solopreneur, you're sitting here in that horrible cycle of sales versus fulfillment, sales
Yeah.
then fulfillment, and you're just sitting there on a treadmill running because you don't have enough resources of time to do both at the same time until you can hire somebody, right? And that's where we buy back our time. Now,
Yeah.
for me, I became an entrepreneur more so than a technician really early on. So I kept hiring more creatives and other marketers so that I could continue growing the business. But I
Yeah.
kept growing it, meaning that it just meant more brute force, hiring salespeople to do the same thing I did, right?
Right.
I didn't have a salesperson until I got to my first million, probably like $1.2 million a year, right?
Yeah.
And then I brought somebody on and I found out that nobody sells like the owner,
That's right.
right? And the thing that this is the crazy thing, as a marketer, you can appreciate this. We suck at marketing ourselves
Yeah.
because we spend all of our energy making other people's marketing
The,
awesome, right?
the cobbler's children have no shoes. Like,
That's
yeah.
right, right? And so so I looked at that, and that was like towards the end of my creative agency days. Is that I'm like, I have three salespeople out other than myself in my company, and I outsold all three of them combined.
Yeah.
And I was running the damn company, right? And when I look back on that, I go, so what was the difference than what I'm doing now? And I found out is like I got really serious about my marketing. See, marketing allows us to leverage what we normally would take time to do ourselves. So even if you're still the only salesperson in your company, having good marketing can leverage or buy back your time really to do other things like, you know, do some product development. For me, it's
Yeah.
actually spending more time in marketing. You might be the technician who just wants more time to be with your clients. Well, if you could get your marketing to work on kind of an autopilot with maybe a little of assistance from an outsourced expert or something like that to maintain things while you're there, you get to do that, right? But until then, you have no chance of scaling because even if you're to hire more salespeople, that's still growth. Because for every salesperson you bring on, you're bringing on more complexities in your culture, more expense, more overhead, the whole nine yards.
Yeah. Well, and it's not leveraged. Like if you think about it, you know what I mean? Like what's the
Volume
old
for
phrase?
volume.
Give me the right place to stand and a lever that's long enough, I can move the world. But if you're
Yeah.
just growing by adding, you're not really
Hmm.
creating that leverage. Whereas,
Right.
technology, data, AI, as you and I were
Yeah.
just playing around with something there before we started, that really creates that leverage that creates that scale instead of,
Hmm.
just growth.
Exactly.
It just really opens up a lot of those things. So I know that as part of this idea of scaling versus growing, you've got, how do you move beyond, just word of mouth and referrals? Is there a magic button? Is it just, creating systems that scale instead of, relying on, only systems that grow additively and thinking through it that way? Or, how do you really approach that?
Well, in today's age, we have to take a look at digital assets, right? And so, amongst or during COVID, I was very blessed. I only lost one client to COVID, and And so, and for the lack of anything, all we were doing was making sure that things kept running the way we had already been doing because we had already brought everybody into the digital world, right? So all they were focused on is being able to deliver in the digital world,
Right.
right? So for us, I had a lot of bandwidth, and me and my mission, I'm like, all these people I can't help. I don't have enough resources. Even if I gave it away free, I wouldn't have enough resources, right? So I was like,
Yeah.
how can I do this? So I started really thinking about like, how is it that I could help lots of people with one from just one person, right? And so I started diving in and looking at what marketing actually moves revenue needles. Because, by 2020, I mean, everybody was sitting there trying to be a TikTok star and an Instagram sensation and a YouTube, whatever, their platinum, blah, blah, blah,
Right.
and then you have click funnels and all the other stuff, right? The two comma clubs and all this stuff. And they're
Sure.
all gimmicks. It's
Yeah.
all gimmicks, right? There's 1% of any of those products that are out there that people are chasing that actually do anything with it,
Yeah.
right? We were looking at it up. There's only 9% or just barely 1 out of 10 companies will ever see the better side of $1 million in revenue. Now, whether they're actually profitable with that $1 million is
Right. That's
another
a whole
totally,
nother question.
right? So out of all of that, I said, okay, if we could just get rid of all the vanity metrics and really look at just revenue-driven KPIs or key performance indicators, and I boiled them down to three.
Okay.
And I realized that when we use these three KPIs and we focus on these three things, and we can really leverage our efforts so much so that if you increase, and I'll give you the three KPIs now: unique traffic,
Yeah.
your website conversion rate
Yeah.
to that, yeah, that's where that, and your average revenue per client from your marketing. Okay, if
Yeah.
you increase each of these by only 26%, you will double your revenue coming from your marketing.
Wow.
And that was where the rule 26 came.
Which I think you've got a book on that, right?
Yes, we do. We got it right there. There it is, right there for those who are watching.
The rule of 26. So if you increase each of those three things by
Mhm.
26%, your revenue doubles.
Doubles 100%. Yeah. So you basically 2x your business just from
And
that. That's
and
not including any of your word of mouth that's already going on and any of your
right.
referrals and all that other stuff. This is now, so a lot of people haven't used their website for marketing. They're like, well, where does that put me? I says, well, that puts you at least 26% more.
Right.
Because if you have zero traffic, your conversions are zero, your clients are zero from it. So if you just were able to get 26 people from your website, that's
Right.
2,600% more opportunities, right? So once you get moving, though, everybody has a little bit of traffic, right?
Right.
Now, if you're not making any sales, then you're going to get 100% growth just by getting one client from it. But
Yeah.
most of us, once we get there, we get up and running pretty quickly, as far as that goes. And the great thing is that you can do the rule of 26 over and over and over again.
And double again and double
Double
again.
again, double again. So it becomes a double, quadruple, octuple, however I say that,
Yeah.
16x, 32.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's,
it
it's
is
that exponential
exponential,
curve that everyone's
right?
chasing instead of just that straight
Right.
line.
And yeah, so you get that hockey stick effect. Now, the one thing that becomes the limiting factor is that your average revenue per client can get to a point of diminishing returns.
Yeah.
So, for those that are super advanced, we say, okay, we'll double up on one of the others. Okay. So, usually what we'll look at is how can we get 52% more unique traffic and then increase our conversion rate by 26% if we're going to just leave our ARCP where we feel like it's maxed out,
Yeah.
right? Okay, fine. It'll still give you double. It's
Yeah.
better than doing 100% more traffic, which costs money usually,
Yeah.
and doubling
And
your,
not impacting the other.
yeah, and doubling your conversion rate is very hard.
That's right.
Is very hard. So it's like, but and because you're talking incremental, I mean, most people don't realize that the average B2B website converts at like 2.5 to 4% tops,
Yeah.
right?
And that conversion is typically not a revenue conversion. Like they're
That's
now
just a
in your
fee.
sales pipeline. Like
Hmm.
that's the conversion that you're getting out
Yeah.
of that two and
Yeah.
a half.
And then you got to take a look at how many of those conversions does it take for you to get a sale, your close rate,
Right.
right? And we
Which
always talk about that.
50% would
Like
be
if you
good.
don't,
Like, yeah,
yeah, if you're talking to 50 people, you're not selling anything. Either you're talking to the wrong people or you're selling the wrong stuff.
that's right. That's right. You're, so with those three metrics,
Uh-huh.
you have some prioritization. Obviously, you need some traffic, but you talked
Hmm.
about, oftentimes getting more traffic might cost.
Yeah.
And, obviously, again, if you're talking to 50 people and you're not selling anything, you're either selling the wrong stuff or talking to the wrong people. But so you need some conversion there, and there's almost always room to grow a little bit on your average
Yeah.
order value. Where do
Mhm.
you recommend companies start as they tackle those three?
I actually go from ARCP back to and work my way back to traffic.
Yeah.
And this is why. 9 times out of 10, you can look at what services you're selling. So, okay, we're B2B guys, okay?
Yeah.
There's only one thing that B2B companies can do: solve other businesses' problems. I don't care if it's a service or a product, you are solving a problem. Otherwise, there is no need for it in business,
Yeah.
right? Period. Okay. So that means the bigger problems we solve, the more we can charge for it, right? Because there's more
Or the more
value.
problems we solve. That's the other lever you could pull. You
You
could
can pull that, but
you could
a
go that,
growth that's a
vertical
growth
integration
metric.
and
But that's a
it's
growth
what?
metric. That's a growth metric.
That's
Okay.
right.
What I teach my clients or show my clients is how, if you can find out what the biggest problem you could solve for your clients, and you
Mhm.
go, but where would they need to be for you to start there? 9 times out of 10, they've got a couple other problems before that problem arises. And so
Yeah.
you can have a series.
Usually they need to be at a certain place
Okay.
before you can solve their problem.
Okay. So
That's
if
good.
you're trying to solve for the biggest problem, that means you have to meet them when they're ready, when they have that problem. But the
Yeah.
crazy thing is that a lot of times you have a series of other problems that they have to go through to get to this big problem.
That's
Okay.
right. That's right.
So if I can find out where that lowest value proposition is, and it's a quick win, low friction for deployment, it's scalable, it's low cost. It's like, okay, I can get these. Now I'm creating a bunch of people in my client value journey versus my sales cycle and my
Yeah.
sales funnel. Sales funnels don't pay me anything. It costs me money, time, and energy to keep people in my sales funnel. But if I can get them over into my client value journey
Right.
at a low cost here, and then what we take a look at when we look at ARCP is now saying, okay, for every problem that I solve, I should be understanding what the next problem is. And as I'm solving this, I'm prepping them for the next problem because I know what that problem already is. And it's
Right.
not that you're creating bad problems, you're creating the good growth and
That's right.
scaling problems that happen with successful businesses,
Yeah.
right?
I've got more money. Where now I got a problem of what do I do with it? Yeah.
Right. I got to hire employees. I got to do this. I got to do
Right.
that. We have a client where our marketing was so good that their fulfillment couldn't keep up. They had to cut
Right.
off
Right.
their marketing for 30 to 45 days while they sat
Right.
there in operations trying to figure stuff out. Right. Now, if I know that, if I'm seeing somebody and I understand that as a marketer, that I understand, hey, listen, your fulfillment's going to cut off. Right. I have another client, their salespeople can't keep up with the marketing. So I'm helping now. I'm their fractional CMO. So I'm a team player going, hey, this is how we can help your sales staff keep up with
Right.
the calls that are coming in, right? But if I'm
Yeah.
just a consultant, or maybe I'm just doing one thing like setting up their CRM, and we notice it's like, hey, listen, who do you have catching those? And I'm not
Right.
the person to do that. I can refer them to somebody. Now, just because I'm not the person to solve that problem, but I give them to somebody who does, guess who actually solved that problem?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And they're going
Yeah.
to come right back to you because guess what's the next problem is? Now I got all these salespeople here. I need more leads. Okay, well,
Right. Yeah.
come on back, right?
Yeah.
So if you can do that and you can find that client value, you can find an exponential amount of ARCP that you can eventually get to. Okay.
Yeah.
And now you understand all of those pains. You can craft your message to connect with those people. Once you have that, you then can go back to your website, go back to your marketing assets, and start framing everything that you talk about around those pain points.
Yeah.
That will increase your conversion rate.
Yeah.
And once you have that conversion rate, then you go back and you say, well, who are those people? What are my most profitable prospects? We call it the perfectly profitable prospect profile, the P3P. It's not an ICP. Everybody goes for ICP, which is kind of an overarching,
Sure.
like for us, well, if they're in business, they're our ICP. They're a B2B
Right.
business,
Right.
they're
Yeah.
our ICP. But
They've got
my
a checkbook.
perfectly
Right.
profitable prospects might be service-based professional services, SWAS, right?
Yeah.
That are already in the seven figures between 1 million and 10 million. That might be my P3P.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm narrowing that down now. Now I'm talking, it's not an avatar, it's a mindset. Like people always talk about what's your avatar? Talk to your avatar. It's like, no,
Right.
get the psychographics around who they are, right? And then what their pains are. And when you do that, you're going to increase your conversion rate. Then you go, okay, with those psychographics, where are they hanging out?
Yeah.
What are their habits? Where are they when they are going to think about or are in a place to think about? Right now, you put that message in front of those people, and those are the good traffic that we're putting in. A lot of people try to put any traffic, and there's like, well, they'll filter themselves out. I say, yeah, but at some point, you're paying for a filter.
That's
Versus,
right.
why don't you pre-filter and just be selective of what you want to pay for coming through your website?
Well, and the heart of marketing strategies, segmentation, targeting, positioning. And so
Right.
if you're not segmenting them appropriately,
Mm-hmm.
then you're really missing that first step of strategy.
Yep.
And you're, sort of going in the wrong direction. I love that, idea of what was the perfectly profitable prospect? Was that
Mm-hmm.
the three
Yep.
P's?
That's a P3P.
P, uh, P3P, and we talk about that, but through a different lens of like, what's the context that they're
Mm-hmm.
operating in, and that
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes we work with companies that like you might improve efficiency or improve effectiveness, whatever it is you do, and if you really look at everybody that you've done business with over the last 2 years. But those that make up your tier one, the 20% that makes up 80% of your billing, you might
Mm-hmm.
see that all of them are people who are using your solution because they're facing headwinds in the market and they're
Mm-hmm.
contracting, and your solution is the ideal solution to that. Alternatively, it could be because they're growing and they've they need to have more effectiveness because of the growth that's happening in their marketplace. But by
Mm-hmm.
understanding that difference and where your product really stands out and can provide that, then you can start to look for signals in the marketplace of, well, who is experiencing a contraction?
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got the segment. Now you can target them
Mm-hmm.
without having to filter them through your website. And then you know your position of, hey, if you're experiencing contraction, we're the
Mm-hmm.
type of solution or the flavor of this solution that's
Mm-hmm.
perfectly aligned because of A, B, and C, rather
Right.
than just, hey, we do this thing
Right.
that improves effectiveness or efficiency in the for businesses, but really knowing the context where you thrive is
Uh-huh.
that key to really differentiated positioning.
Right. It's funny. I have a client that is a software that does process mapping. And we're trying
Okay,
to figure out, who would benefit from most. And they're like, well, all businesses would benefit from. I said, that's fine.
sure,
That's okay. But who? Who are we going to go after first, right?
right,
Because a lot of people, they think that, well, if anybody can use it, then I'll just put it out there to everybody and somebody will grab it. But when you're trying to be everything to everyone, you become just a part of the noise, and
yeah, you're
nobody
no
loves
one
you.
to anyone.
Yeah, because they don't get you, and you have to meet people where they're at.
Yeah,
I have what I call the five pillars of B2B marketing, and it's an acronym, and it stands for focus, identity, visibility, and effectiveness. Okay, and or efficiency is it, we're still playing with the E here.
okay,
Effectiveness and efficiency, same. But anyway, efficiencies, right? And in that focus, a lot of people like you talked like Dan Ogilvy or Donald Miller, those guys are like, you need to start with focusing on who you serve. Well, I say no. Focus on what you do, why you do it, and how you do it. Okay. So what do you do really well? Because a lot of people are like, I want to work with so and so and help with this pain. Okay, that's great. But now you're building your product around somebody else's pain that's going to shift versus what do I do really well? Right. Like for me, I do strategy and messaging extremely well. and I hire around me everything else, right? Because I can do it, but it's not my, as Stephen Covey would say, tier quadrant one.
Right.
Really good at it and really like
And
doing it,
and
right?
really like doing it. That's right.
But for your business, that's it. We have all these services that we can do, and there's all these people we could serve. But if you get your focus on what you do really well, you now eliminate your competition,
Right.
and now you can take that and put it in front of different types of people and find out who, because sometimes we think we know who, but when we go to test market we find out that who doesn't care,
Right. Or doesn't have the money for it. Yeah.
right? And so then we start test marketing in front of that, and then we get traction with one and instead of a bunch, and then we can get really deep with that one segment, right? That one niche, right? And we're like, okay, cool, cool, cool. Now when you get to that, to a point where it's like, wow, this is running on its own, right? We've got word of mouth feeding our marketing, that's giving feedback loops, all these other things that are going. The client value journey is just, it's taken off. Now you can reverse engineer that and now test what you've learned with that niche with another niche.
Yeah.
This is how 10 million to $100 million companies act, is
Yeah.
that they go really deep in very, very narrow minded in one direction. They get super deep and they climb themselves back out, and then they start drilling in another space once this space right here is running on its own.
That's right.
Because when you start juggling, you're now only touching a ball every once in a while versus keeping your hands on the ball and getting it to the goal line.
Yeah, I think it's in Crossing the Chasm, Jeffrey Moore talks about like you pick that niche and then you focus on it until you're winning. He likes the term 80% of all the deals in a year
Mm-hmm.
that is part of your, sort of serviceable, addressable market.
Mm-hmm.
Until you're winning 80% of those, you
Yeah.
don't shift to that next niche
Right. Why
because
would
you
you?
haven't. Yeah,
Why
exactly.
would you?
Because
Like,
you haven't
you
dominated
become
yet.
the category king,
That's
and they
right.
do say that what you need about 1 million.
Hmm.
Is that 1 million? Is it? It's right under 1 million. Yeah, there's a if you chat GPT it, you can find it. But there's a formula that says like this is a viable niche because
Right.
some niches are too small,
Right. Right. Right.
right? And so you have to take a look at like how many of those do I need to be profitable,
Yeah.
and how scalable is that, right? If there's only 2,000 I have a friend who did PPC specifically
Hmm.
for, so that's pay-per-click Google ads for those who don't
Yeah.
know. And then he looked at Montessori schools. There's only 4,000 of them, or 2 or 4,000, I can't remember
Yeah.
exactly, but there's only a handful of them in the
That's a
United
small
States.
niche. Yeah.
It's a very, very small niche. Now, he exited that company at 8 figures.
Right.
Okay. So each of those clients were worth a lot of money,
Yeah.
right? And so once he did it for one and it was able to do for two, it's such a small community. He was able to own that category that nobody was trying to compete for.
Right.
The
Right.
only reason you would try to get to a Montessori school would be you tripped over them talking to some,
Right.
complaining about
Right.
their marketing, and they happen to be at a Montessori school. That's the only
Right.
reason you would be working with them, right?
Yeah. That's right.
So, so anyway.
Interesting. Well, and makes it a very defensible niche because no one else is trying to come in
Right.
because you own it. And
Right.
so you've got that nice moat, nice wall to keep other folks out. Well, Buzz, you are a font of knowledge, and we could talk about this all day because we're both really passionate about it, but I got to be mindful of your time. That said, what's something on the horizon that you're excited about with buzzworthy marketing or otherwise?
Oh man. So buzzworthy marketing. I'm really excited about our launch this year of BuzzHub, which is
Yeah,
the B2B marketing OS. So we
yeah,
finally have curated a marketing operating system specifically made for the needs of B2B service providers. And it is amazing. It meets people where they're at. We have 3 different tiers. So the people who are just getting started, the people who are in the growth mode, and the people who are ready to scale. We were able to just get a system that actually works for the sales cycle of B2B, because most marketing operating systems out there are either at the enterprise level
yeah,
or they're geared to B2C. And they
yeah,
miss all of the nurturing and all of the automations that are just required because all of the touch points we need in the B2B world. Personally, The 5 pillars of B2B marketing, like I told you about, that is a concept that I have finally flushed out of
Yeah.
all of the other things and I've decided to write a book on that one. So
Awesome.
teaching it to other B2B businesses of like, these are the 5 things that we need to be focused on. The Rule of 26 is obviously mixed into there in the
Cool.
efficiency spot of that, but you got a little taste with focus and really just reimagining how we approach marketing so that we can find where we're going to be the most profitable.
That's awesome. Great stuff. Obviously, a very exciting horizon out there for you. So, for our listeners that have been listening and they want to learn more about these 5 pillars or the Rule of 26, what's the best way for folks to get in touch with you?
I'm going to give you 2 URLs. I know I'm breaking the cardinal rule, but if you want to check out Buzzworthy Marketing, go to buzzworthy.biz. That's B-I-Z.
Yeah.
And if you want to check out the book, I am.
So, for those that have been listening and are really excited about the five, the FIVE, and want to learn more about the Rule of 26, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
So if you want to check out Buzzworthy Marketing, what we're offering there, go to buzzworthy.biz. That's B-I-Z.
Yeah.
And if you want to get a free signed copy of my book, The Rule of 26, go to ruleof26.com. I'll personally sign it for you. All I do ask is that you pay for the shipping and handling.
That's a great deal. That's a great deal. Well, Buzz, thanks so much for joining us today. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Thanks so much for having me.
Talk to you soon.
Thank you for joining this episode of the B2B Growth Blueprint Podcast. We hope you've gained insights to grow your business. If you enjoyed this discussion, please rate, comment, like on your favorite platform, and share to others who will find it useful. Do you know a CEO, founder, or leader at an early stage B2B services, tech, or SaaS company who would like to be a guest and share their story? Send us a note. Let's schedule a conversation.